Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Dr. Walter Kimbrough. Dr. Kimbrough, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
All right, thank you for having me.
Man, it's a pleasure having you here on the Black Male Impact. I've seen the great work that you're doing. But before we get into the conversation itself, I just like to tell the listeners a little about you, which I'll give you the opportunity to talk more about yourself. So Dr. Kimbrough, born to rebel like Benjamin Mays, transformed nonconformist like Martin Luther King, fighting the power like Public Enemy. Dr. Kimbrough, please share with the listeners about yourself and the work that you are doing to make a difference, especially in the space of education.
Yeah, so the way I look at it is somebody who grew up in Atlanta. Atlanta is sort of like the crucible of the civil rights movement. So all of those key players growing up, you heard the name. I was too young to have met Martin Luther King Jr., but a lot of his lieutenants, I grew up about a mile away from Andrew Young. I met Hosea Williams. I met Jesse Jackson. So a lot of the key people I've had a chance to interact with. But as somebody who grew up there, I really started to study King more and really became very interested in him. And even more than King, I became interested in his college president, Benjamin Mays. I went to Benjamin Mays High School in Atlanta. It was named after him because at that time he had left Morehouse. He was president of the Atlanta School Board. And so learning about what Mays did as a president and how he engaged, I really tried to model being a college president after Benjamin Mays is to see the kind of impact he had on Martin Luther King Jr. He had such an impact that he was the one that gave King's eulogy at his funeral. So it just shows you, Mays was an ordained minister just like King, but that's the kind of relationship that they had. So Born to Rebel is the title of Benjamin Mays' autobiography. So it just sort of lets you know what kind of person he was. He really pushed back, and we don't think about college presidents as being rebellious, but he felt like he was doing that. Transform Nonconformist is one of the great sermons from Martin Luther King Jr. He just talks about how do you change systems, and you just can't conform. You got to be this transformed nonconformist, because if he had conformed to everything, you wouldn't have the civil rights gains that we achieved and everything. And then being from the hip hop generation, Public Enemy was, during my college years, that was a soundtrack for my college experience. And they really pushed the envelope on a lot of issues that you don't get as much with music today. Of course, Fight the Power was one of the big songs as well, but they had lots of songs that really addressed what was happening even today. They had an album called Fear of a Black Planet. And I keep thinking about how, as we prepare for our next presidential election, the number of white Americans who are going to vote for Trump because they fear a black planet. That's exactly what we're experiencing now. And that album came out 88 maybe. That's what we're seeing right now. So all those things together sort of encapsulate, I think, who I am and what's important to me.
Man, that's awesome, man. That's great. And I know that you have served over 30 years in education. Before we get into the conversation itself that we really hear about, do you want to share anything about that experience to the listeners?
Well, I was just able to sort of find my way into education. I grew up thinking I was going to be a veterinarian, got into vet school early, and it was like, that's not what I want to do. But being active and involved on my campus at the University of Georgia, I was like, no, man, I might want to be a president, and had a chance to talk to a president to say, I think this is what I want to do. So once you sort of find that thing, and I worked in student affairs, worked in student activities, I was like, yeah, this is really what I wanted to do. So, and then you have a chance to interact and engage with lots of people over the course of your career. So you really get to help students. I've talked about this idea of being an architect of the future. Architects build things that we can't even see. So you help students sort of build out a future that they don't see it currently, but you help them sort of sketch out what that might look like and how to build it out. So I think that's what a lot of people in education, we have a chance of being architects for the future for young people. So yeah, that's the way I look at it. So it's a great opportunity working with students on campuses. It's a fantastic job.
Man, awesome. And I know I read your articles a lot, especially when I see them popped up, because I'm looking for ideas and, just the best way to make an impact, especially an individual who have been doing the work before I do. So it's always great to learn from those before us. So I'm going to jump straight into the questions that I have here. that I want to ask you today. So my first question is, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
Yeah, I think there is a mindset of experimentation, taking risks, taking initiative, knowing that sometimes it's trial and error. So
Okay.
it's not to be discouraged if something doesn't go the way, but it's like being excited about the opportunity of trying something different, being able to assess to say, okay, did that work the way I thought it would? It didn't work that way. What can I do differently? So has to be this mindset that you don't get easily discouraged. I mean, that's not to say that you won't be discouraged at all, because there can be some discouragement, but you learn from those mistakes, and then you try to come up with new ways. You pay attention to what's going on and figure out how you can use what's happening in the world to make change. So it's a lot of trial and error. It's initiative. It's developing the thick skin when things don't go well. But that's a part of, I think, the mindset.
Well, and I think that's a valid point because that's where a lot of people are afraid to take initiatives because they don't want to make mistakes. And the fear of making mistakes can stop us from come up with great ideas or to make an impact. So I really appreciate that perspective because if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to make a great impact, we have to be willing to take those chances. And those chances sometimes come with coming short of the impact that we want to make. So I really appreciate that reminder. And I know the listeners too, especially having the desire to make a difference. So I really appreciate that. So that leads me to my next question. What advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Oh, I think it's easy. You have to sort of find whatever your sphere of influence is and to lean into that. There are lots of ways that I don't think there's a one size fits all. You have to decide, where can I make an impact based on what I'm good at, what I like. I think about it more. My son plays AAU basketball, and I look at the number of particularly Black men that I see that are coaching those teams. They don't get any money for it. They don't get sometimes the extra kudos. Sometimes it's rough dealing with the parents, particularly the moms. They give them a hard time. But those guys, they make an impact. And so for me, for my son to have a chance to interact with other Black men, so hear everything from your dad. Sometimes you can't. You can't hear everything your dad is saying because it's your dad. But you can hear something that the coach might say. That I think that's a positive. So I mean, you could do it through sports or through a religious organization or through fraternities. There's just lots of different ways that people. So it's like wherever you find yourself, that's where you have an opportunity. No matter what you do, you can find a way to make an impact there. So, like I said, I've been looking at it differently because I just really pay attention to some of the guys I see that are coaching some of the kids, and you see some that are bad that just you start off hollering and screaming at them. It's like but then you watch others that are really teaching, and they're teaching life skills as well, and that's very positive.
And I think that's a valid point in creating positive change that we have to make the impact wherever we are
Right.
and help the young people to see through us what is possible. Because if they can't see through us what is possible, they may get distracted with all the distractions that are happening around them. And for us as Black men, I think we have to really take that seriously and don't really look at our positions based on where we are, but see the position despite of the positions that we're in, to see ourselves as people who can make a difference, who can be the example, who can be the role model for our young men so they can grow up and see and know what is possible. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's a great reminder. And that's something that we may take lightly, but it is really important that we make the influence and impact wherever we are. And this next question is somewhat similar to the previous question, but how can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative today? And you can choose whichever narrative you want to focus on.
Well, I think for a lot of people, and I think about how powerful social media can be. If we spent more time amplifying positive stories, like people amplify the negative ones, you really could make an impact. I mean, to get something, because I found that people do look for those very positive viral moments. For example, my last year at Dillard, we had a young lady who was scheduled to deliver a baby on graduation day. And she was just like, I'm gonna make it. And I was like, Jayla, I don't know. I don't know if you're gonna make it. It was first baby, and I was like, they don't. And so that morning, like at 5 in the morning, she texted me like, I'm not gonna make it a commencement. I'm having a baby right now. So she didn't make, so I talked to her later that afternoon. I was like, okay, so when can we visit? My wife knows her too. So that Sunday, the very next day, I went to the hospital and did like the graduation part of the ceremony in the hospital after she had the baby less than 24 hours before. That became one of the biggest national stories I've ever been involved in. I mean, it was Good Morning America, CBS Morning News, USA Today. It was everywhere because people were just like, wow, you got this Black man who doesn't have to do this. He's the president, but he goes to the hospital to do the graduation ceremony for this student that just had a baby. And it stood out for me. That's just normally what I would do. But people hadn't seen anything like that. And that story just became a massive viral story. So it just tells me that, yeah, people like the gossip stuff. They want to know, what did he do and everybody else. I understand that, but people are hungry for those kinds of stories. So sometimes it's up to us to start putting more of those out there. So when people see them, they're like, oh, okay, this is really great. When they see the stories of there's a young student here who he got into like 100 different colleges and universities. It was a big story just everywhere. People look for those kinds of things. So we have some agency in that to use what we have to really uplift those kinds of stories. So if we did more of those and less of the sort of gossipy type stuff, Hollywood stuff, that would help change the narrative in terms of what people think about in terms of Black men, those kinds of things. Because like I said, just being a part of a big viral story, just people just didn't expect the college president to do that. And I was like, oh yeah, this is what I do. This is who I am as a person. And it gave people a different insight in terms of you see a Black man in a very positive light doing something that people would consider to be above and beyond. So like I said, I've been a part of it. I know people are hungry for those stories.
And really, I really appreciate you sharing that and remind the listeners of how important it is to think outside the box. But you say something really important that I just want to share again with the listeners, and that is to amplify the positive stories. We tend to, a lot of times, see, especially as you mentioned on social media, a lot of the negative stories keep circulating. And if we can take the initiative and amplify the positive, we can help change the narrative, especially when it comes to us as Black men, because we know the perception and the misconceptions that are spread around about Black men. And if we want to change that perception or the misconception about us as Black men, we have to take the initiatives and share those positive stories. And I really appreciate you reminding all of us how important it is, because we don't have to wait on mainstream media to amplify the positive messages. We have to take those initiatives and share the positive things that we are doing as Black men. But I just want to go back to that story that you share. How did the students on your campus react to seeing you all over the place from that positive interaction?
No, they weren't surprised. I mean, like I said, it was people on campus weren't surprised. They just know that's who I am.
Okay.
So it was, I think, for people outside because they're just like they've never seen a college president do anything like that. So that was the big deal. College of any race, they just haven't seen that before. But if you ask people on my campus, that wouldn't have been a big deal. I mean, students sometimes, if students have been in the hospital for a car accident, I'm calling. It's just the little things that I do that they're used to. So it wasn't, I don't think that was a big story. I think they were proud. They knew the young lady, she was very popular. And the day of commencement, I do like I do like what I call senior shout outs and talk about this person's going to law school, this going to medical school, they're doing this. And I said, and Jada had planned on being here today, but she's not here because she just had the baby, blah, blah. So I could share that with her class and the people at commencement. And so that was another moment there. But for me to be that in contact with her, to know all that information, I think was really good. So that they're used to it. They know who I am. But that was, like I said, for other people, they're just like, I've never seen anything like that before.
Well, and as you mentioned, the students weren't surprised because they know the type of person you are. And I think as a leader, that is really important too, for the students to have that type of sense of who you are as a leader and knowing that you care, because I think one of the biggest things that we can do is to care, especially when we're not just leadership roles, but once we serve in people, one of the best thing we can do is care about the people we are serving. And once they get to know that, the impact is endless, I believe. But I think that is really important that they know you care about them. And that's really an inspiring story, because as Black men, those are the things that we want to hear more of and
Mhm.
see happening more. And they are happening, but sometimes there are the stories that may not be shared as much as we should share those stories. And that leads, oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay, okay. Well, that leads me to my next question. What or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on or to
Um,
go into education?
yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a range of people. I think the first person would be Walter Washington. He was president of Alcorn State in Mississippi. And he's the person that I talked to when I said, I think I might want to be a college president because he had been one. And I was like, what should I do? And he said, go get this master's degree in college student personnel. I didn't know what that was, but he had been a president for like 15 or 17 years. So I figured he knew what he was talking about. So he would be the first person to really put me on that path. And there's somebody like Portia Holmes Shields, who was a president of Albany State. She hired me to be her vice president. And it was interesting because the last round of interviews, she wanted to come to the campus where I was working to talk to people. So it was strange setting up groups for a person to meet with who was about to hire me. So some of the students that were there, like it, they were just like, wait a minute, you getting ready to leave? What is this about? So it was interesting. But she told me, she said, look, if you come work with me in less than 5 years, you're going to be a president. And less than 5 years, I was a president. So she played a big role. So I think the two of them, there have been a lot of people along the way that I interacted with. I mean, just it's a long list. But those two stand out because one put me on the track, and then the other basically said, I'm going to finish it off. If you do this with me, you're going to be there. So those two, I think, are the key people for me.
As just listening to you sharing that, I think as you shared, having a person to be our champion is important, and
Yeah.
just be open to learn, because sometimes we can have people around us and we're not willing to or open to learn. So being open to learn is important as we navigate our way going forward on our journey. But let me ask this question: being in that position as the president, do you have young men come up to you and ask how can they become the president, and what does that experience like for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because once or twice a month, I get some random email from somebody or some message on LinkedIn saying, hey, I want to be a president. Can you mentor me? And it becomes a difficult question because, and I've been trying to get people to think about it differently. I think the mentoring works better with somebody that you have a relationship with already. And so I always tell people at this stage, if it's somebody that I haven't ever met before, anything like that, I said, there might be some questions I can answer for you along the way. I tell them, particularly early on in their career, don't focus on the end right now because you don't have any control whether or not you'll be a president or not. Right now, you should be trying to do the best job that you can do with the job that you have. You just need to be excellent right now. So forget about the long term for right now. And then I tell people when they get closer and they're like, in a real presidential search, I tell them I have more value then because I've been in searches. I know some of the key players. So then you can start asking questions and now I can give you intel. And I think that's much more valuable than me trying to tell you you're a new professional or go to this association. That's not going to help you. When you're building up to that, you just need to be great. But then if you have somebody that has some intel that can tell you that like, no, I don't know about that place because they've had these issues. But this place is really good. And I say as a person who I have people like that for me now. So if I'm in a search, there's somebody that I reach out to and I'm saying, hey, what do you know about this? What do you think? And so that's the role of that person. We have a long-standing relationship too. And there's a book that a colleague of mine, the president of Wiley, he's been sharing with people. And the title of the book basically sort of says, forget a mentor, get a sponsor. because mentoring is more like that person, the mentor, is giving to you. You aren't really in a reciprocal relationship. A sponsor is a reciprocal relationship, because if that sponsor puts you on, you have a duty to them to make them look good and that kind of thing. And a sponsor sometimes will put your name up for something that you had no idea you were being considered for. So you really want to develop sponsorships versus mentorships. Actually, Felicia Butterfield Jones, who used to work, I think she's working now with the Grammys. She spoke on my campus years ago, and that's the first time I heard somebody talk about get a sponsor. And I was like, oh, a sponsor. Okay. And so I'm hearing more. And like I said, there's this woman who wrote a book about it. And I was like, yeah, that's what people need to get. So not because you can learn from people. I would consider Benjamin Mays a mentor of mine. And I actually met him when I was in high school, but we didn't have any conversations as me being an adult, because he died when I was in high school. But I've read about him. I've read his words. So I've learned a lot about being a president from Benjamin Mays, even though he's dead. Okay. So he could be a mentor for me just based on the body of work that he left for me. So I tell people, you can learn from people by studying their career path and those kinds of things. But you really want to work toward getting a sponsor, because that person will put your name in a hat for something and really work behind the scenes to help you. And I think those relationships are very, very, very important. So I've been trying to tell people, you get to people say, hey, I want to do that. And I always just say, right now, you just focus on being great wherever you are. And then when you get closer to that point, that's when I think I can play a greater role. And so I do have people like that who will say, all right, I'm looking at these two. What do you know? Now I have a lot of value because I've been around. I can say, I know this person there. I know this person. I know the history. I know why this happened. This is a real good opportunity. This one's sketchy. And then they can make their own decision, but I'm now providing valuable intel. And I think that's helpful for people.
Man, that's a great response to the question. You share a lot of value in the response you just made. But I will say, as you mentioned, to be excellent wherever you are. And I think that's something that we cannot stress too much. We're where we are, so might as well we do the best that we can where we are. Because I do believe, there are people who are always watching, and we never know who is watching. So it's best if we show up and be the best version of ourselves in that space, in that environment. And as you mentioned, sponsor. And I heard a term recently, but I wasn't really looking or paying much attention, like to the importance of having a sponsor. But if someone want to have a sponsor, right? What would be the approach you think? Because I know that requires building a relationship. So how would you advise someone who want to get someone to be a sponsor?
Well, so I think one of the good things about that sponsorship is that if you're doing great work, the sponsor will come find you. It's hard to get somebody to say, will you be my sponsor? No, that's not. Because they're looking at, like, if I'm sharing my network and my brand with you, are you going to help? So this person says, oh, that's one of Walter's proteges. That's good for me. So like I said, the sponsorship in this book talks about it. It's a reciprocal relationship. It's not just them putting you on. It's like knowing that you're going to be in places where you have influence that can help me do some things that I want to do as well. So it's not always something that you can go out and say, hey, will you be my sponsor? The sponsor will make themselves known. So for example, there was a young lady who was working on a dissertation in my research area, and I didn't know her, and she reached out and she said, will you serve on my dissertation committee? So the topic was interesting. I was like, yeah, I like to do. So that was, to me, it wasn't a heavy lift. The way that this institution set it up, if you work with a person for the dissertation, they pay a little money too. So I was like, okay, that's cool. But it was more the topic and not as much about the person. But then I had a chance to go through, read her work, provide feedback. I got to see how she worked. And I was like, oh, she has some potential. So once she got a dissertation done, I was like, there's a national association that you need to present at. And she had never been there or done anything. I said, look, we're going to put both of our names on the program, because I presented there a number of times. So I'm pretty sure my name is on the program proposal, is getting accepted. And so it got accepted. So then all I did was, for our session, is I did a quick 3-minute overview of just the topic, and I turned it over to her. That's sponsorship. because then she got speaking engagements after that. And I have nothing to do with it. But what my job was to put her out there and say, this is my person right here. She's really good. Y'all listen. And she blew everybody away. So I had a chance, but she just asked me to serve on a dissertation, which I did that, but watching, and I could vouch for her. I've seen how she writes. I've seen her work ethic. So I can be a sponsor because I know if I put my name next to hers, I'm not going to be embarrassed. I know how she works. So that's how you're able to be a sponsor. So it's like if somebody asks me about her, it's like, oh yeah, I can tell you about her because I've seen it firsthand. And for her to be out there and presenting, and because some of my work is referenced in her dissertation, that's good for me. That's how the sponsorship works.
That's valuable. And as Black men, that's something that we can do, especially when we're in the position to do so, because we have to be the ones to open doors for others at times,
Right.
and see the value in opening doors for others. And that leads me to, I would just really appreciate you sharing that on sponsorship, even before I go to the next question, because people sometimes want opportunity and may not know how to. And the two valuable points that you've made, I believe, is important. Do great work wherever you are, and people will see. And sometimes that leads to building great relationships. So I appreciate that. So that leads me to my next question. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Like everything, it's a mixed bag. It's always been like that for Black men. It's a challenge. There are a lot of shining lights of Black men that are doing things that we've never seen before, that are really good, but you still have particularly challenges with criminal justice and our engagement, and particularly for young Black men, because people will argue, and I'm probably more conservative on this to say, they're not having enough opportunities. When unemployment has been so low so long, people are dying for people to work. But we've gotten some because we buy into this media narrative that I'm too good to have a basic kind of job. It's like, you're in high school, you around here robbing people, go get a job at McDonald's. I mean, work your way up like everybody else. And a lot of young men don't want to do that. So they end up doing these high risk activities that end up filling up our prisons. And so when you're in a period when you have this really, really low unemployment and people are begging, I mean, I was right after the pandemic, I was going through a drive-through at a McDonald's. The owner was out there, somebody that I know. He said, man, I'm giving bonuses for people to come work at McDonald's. That's crazy to me. And Popeyes was doing that. All these fast food places couldn't find people to work. So there still is a shortage of workers. And so we got to not have people, we've gotten this sort of, I don't know, fast food and social media perspective that I'm supposed to be successful. A lot of college students are like this. I go to college and immediately I need to be making six figures. I saw a former student of mine who posted on LinkedIn, and I only want a remote work. I need to make six figures. And I'm thinking, you got like 2 years of experience. You're not getting, it was like unrealistic, but that's part of the challenge, is that people have unrealistic expectations and they don't want to start at the bottom and work their way up. They expect, I got a degree, I'm coming in making six figures. So even for young people, it's like, I'm too good to do that. So instead I get involved in, and so that's the issue. Those are the challenges. I think sometimes we make a few too many excuses, and we need to be like, come on, y'all. I mean, there still are some structural things against us as Black men, but there are some opportunities that we're passing over too. And so we've got to focus on some of the basics, do well in school. And if anything that hurts us, I think it is school. And we've got to have more people fixing the school systems. But it's just still everywhere we go. If you watch the news, in the first 5 minutes of news, and they have a crime and they show the mugshot, that person is going to look like me or you most of the time. It's just, that's the way, and it's been like that, and we got to do something. So some of it is mentality. I think there have been times when it's been harder for Black men than it is now. I mean, it's not to say that there aren't challenges. Like I said, we still got this strange relationship with the police, and you see these upstanding good men not doing anything wrong being hurt, murdered by police. So that still is not a good thing. But we've got to get some people to say, I'm going to take the basic route. I'm going to work hard, work my way up. But like I said, there are some, a lot of good things too. A lot of places that we haven't seen Black men before, which are really positive. So I think it's balancing out better now than it would have even 20 or 30 years ago. We still got more work to do, but there are, at least now, there are more images of Black men doing things that we've never seen Black men do, like Joint Chiefs of Staff. We didn't have Black men in those roles. You get more of those people like that, military leaders. And so those are the kinds of things I think that help balance it.
Well, and I really appreciate that perspective because we still have a lot of work to do. And yes, we have Black men in spaces that we can be proud of. Because I can remember when I started my doctoral journey, I didn't know there were so many Black males who were doctors and have PhDs and were superintendents and presidents. So there are Black men doing great. But as you mentioned, we still have a lot of work to do. And I think you share a valid point in regards to it should be okay to start from the bottom and work our way up. Nothing is wrong with doing honest work to get to where we want. And I think once we do that, there are a lot of things that we can learn through the process and of becoming who we want to be. And so it's not just to get there, because sometimes getting there, you may get there and still don't know what to do when you get there. So I think the process is important as we work our way, not just for success, but also to help change the perspective and the narrative when it comes to us as Black men. And that leads me to my next question. And I think you kind of answer it just now, but I'm still going to ask the question, what change do you want to see in general amongst Black men?
Yeah, I mean, I would just really would love to see us really attack education on a level that we haven't done before. I just think there's so much genius that is untapped. I heard a graduation speech this past weekend, Southern University. The speaker is a pastor of a big church in Nashville, has 25,000 members. And he just talked about, he said, you can't convince me that somebody knows how to make crack and they can't do chemistry. And I was like, I mean, it's like, and I mean, I spent like 6 months working in a juvenile detention center in Raleigh, North Carolina. I mean, there was some brilliant. The biggest drug dealer in Raleigh at that time was like 15 years old. That boy was brilliant. I mean, because I had plenty of conversations with him. He was brilliant. He should have been so, I mean, he could do a lot of really good things, but he got caught in his lifestyle. If we could just get people to just attack education like they do some of these other things, it's so much untapped genius, and it just gets wasted because you're in these high risk things. It seems like high reward, but that doesn't last long, and you either end up dead or in jail. And so it's just trying to get people to look at some long-standing careers. Even, I mean, people getting caught up in the athletics. Those athletic careers, for the most part, are short term. So that can't be the only thing that you do. Is, I mean, if you had an opportunity, definitely go do it. But there should be some plans in place. And there are now really great role models about what do you do after your career, like a Magic Johnson. Shaq is making a killing. He's making a killing. So you have people like him. You have Charles Barkley now doing a talk show on CNN. I mean, they're making more money now than they did playing basketball. Right. So there are examples out there now to say, okay, I have this career, but how do I set myself up for what's after this career and not end up like so many athletes where your career is over and you're broke.
Correct.
So that's it. Just like educating yourself, getting a good team of people around you to help do the right kinds of things. But I would love to see like a new generation of young Black men saying we're going to lean into education and see what we can do. Because I think that would scare this country more than anything else. Because we would take over everything. I mean, as a people, there's just this level of creativity that is unmatched. But you add the right kind of education along with it. Yeah, we could do a lot. So that's what I would really just like there to be some kind of like movement, educational movement that we get young Black men really excited about learning and see what happens. I just think it'd be fantastic.
That is great. And I was listening to something yesterday that says anything that we are a part of and we get access to, we excel. As you mentioned, with the young man who was 15 and was doing the drug and still excel at it, pointing that young man in the right direction, he would excel. Maybe in chemistry, he could become a doctor. But sometimes not having the right guidance and the right direction or role model sometimes cause our young men to go in the wrong direction. But when things change, because I've seen young men who have started in the wrong direction and get the opportunity and start to do well on the academic side. So it's
Right.
not that our young men don't have the cognitive ability. It's sometimes it's just lack of access. And you mentioned Shaquille and those other guys who are doing great. One of the reasons why I even respect Shaquille O'Neal, it's he went on from an athlete to get his doctorate degree, which is
Mhm.
really commendable. It is showing the young people, especially who aspire to be professional athletes, the importance of education. And I think I was reading something that they were trying for him to do it online and said, no, I want to have the classroom experience. That in itself is a powerful statement. And our young people, and there are a lot more guys out there who are professional athletes who are doing well, who have done well academically. There are a few guys that I showed to, especially high school, when I go to speak, that some of these guys, they had like 4.0 GPA. So they were doing well in the
Right.
classroom and also on the field of sports or the field of play. So that's a great reminder that we do have the ability to do well and we can excel in any area that we choose. And that leads me to my next question. What was a pivotal moment in your life outside of you doing the graduation in the hospital with the young lady?
Oh, I just think for me, just like I said, meeting the college president to ask him what should I do, and he just sort of put me on the right track. That was because that changed everything. I didn't, like I said, I had no clue about this master's program he was recommending. And that changed everything for me. So it was just trusting somebody that I figured really knows what he's talking about and just did exactly what he said, no questions asked.
That's great. So as Black men, we have to trust those people who have our best interests at heart. Because sometimes when we don't know exactly where we want to go, or maybe even the impact that we can have, sometimes people will see in us what we don't see. And if we can trust those people who have our best interests at heart, we can achieve great success. And that leads me to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Well, I mean, it hadn't been late in life. I mean, the lesson I always tell people is I met a writer by the name of Elan Harris. It must have been about 1998. He was speaking at Old Dominion University, where I was director of student activities. And in his speech, he told the audience that the key to life is to find something that you love doing that you would do for free and find a way to get paid to do it. And I tell people that's the key to life for me. He summed it up. I tell everybody that was, to me, that's a life lesson, because if you can really find that thing that you love doing, because there's still this, the research says most people hate their jobs and
Correct.
they're just working a job. So it's like, if you can find something that you, so for me, even with some of the challenges being the president, I love it. I could do it. I do it for free, but then I can get paid to do it. It's like, yeah, that's perfect. So it's being open to try to figure out, what is that for me? What is that thing I like? And it's just something I would just do every day. And then is there a way for me to be compensated to do what I love doing? You can figure that out. And like I said, it's hard. It's not guaranteed. Everybody won't have that experience. But if you're fortunate to have that, yeah, you found something. So yeah.
And that's great. But as you mentioned, as a president, what was the you like most about the job itself?
I'll just engaging students. I mean, you have those relationships that carry on. One of my students from, I wasn't president, I was a vice president of Albany State. Well, this student was real close to my family. She became the first Black and first woman judge in Augusta, Georgia, just a couple of years ago. I mean, she just barely 40. So, but you get to be a part of that experience for that. I was at her wedding. I mean, all those kinds of things, they become an extension of your family. So you get to interact with a lot of people. And then some students become what I call non-biological children. They're just like your kids. They spend Thanksgiving with you. They visit you when they come to town. So you end up having a bigger family. I think that's a benefit. You get to work with a lot of really smart people and meet a lot of interesting people. All that's fun too. But watching, we're at a phase now, we're just watching these people grow up and have families. It's like, wow, I remember you were just 18 years old and you ain't know nothing. And you're a judge now. It's like just laughing about it's like crazy. But yeah.
Just listening to you, I can just sense the compassion and care you have for the students, which I believe is important in any formal role within the education space for the students. Students need to know that those who are entrusted really care about them in itself. So I really appreciate you sharing that about your experience and why you enjoy the experience. But listeners, if you want to, it's important that you enjoy the work that you are doing. So, and that leads me to my next question. Where can the listeners find you and help support the great work that you're doing to make a difference?
Well, so right now I'm hanging out in limbo doing different things. I'm spending a semester with Rutgers. Most of it's virtual. They're president and resident, so I'll be doing some work with Rutgers in New Jersey. I'm still affiliated with the University of Southern California. So I'm just all over the place trying to figure out like what's the next stop for me. So I would just tell people stay tuned, and hopefully within the next 6 months I'll know my next sort of permanent stop. But right now I'm just really experiencing lots of different things, which has been good. Just to take a break from the presidency, which is it's draining. It's a tough job. So to have some time off has been great.
Okay, great, great, great. So what is Campus Speak?
So Campus Speak is a speakers bureau. So with them, they book engagements for me. So you do some of those. I got several coming up in January. So like I said, I'm doing a colleague of mine called it the Mosaic Career, where you're doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, which has been cool.
Well, you have over 30 plus years experience in education, so you have a lot of value to share with different schools or organizations. So that's great. So my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
Well, I always tell people your impact, I think, will be seen based on the people that you've interacted with. So it's not if I can help young people become their best selves, that'll sort of be my impact. So a lot of times people, they become a president, they want their name on a building and those kind of, I don't want any of that. It's like people talk about their legacy. It's like, no, my legacy will be, it's a living legacy. It's those students that will say, that was my president. And now they're, like I said, the first Black woman judge in Augusta. She's a part of, and I was just a vice president at the time. I wasn't even a president then, but we're definitely connected like that, that a big part of her growing up and maturation was her relationship with my family, me and my wife. So that becomes the impact. The impact should be multiplied effect. And like I said, my dad's a United Methodist minister who retired, had big churches. So it'll be the same thing for him. There are a lot of people who have been impacted by his ministry and those kind of things. My mom taught at Clark Atlanta, so some of her students. So that's the way I think you have to look at it. How many people can you touch and get them to do good things for other people? Then it has a multiplier effect. So that's the way I look at it.
Man, that's great. Making an impact and touching the lives of others. I think that is important. Man, Dr. Kimbrough, you have shared a wealth of knowledge and insights and perspective here on the Black Male Impact. Man, I can't believe the time run off so fast. But I want to say thanks again for being here on the Black Male Impact.
You're welcome, no problem.
Thanks. And listeners, as always, our goal is to bring guests that we believe will share knowledge that is beneficial. And so please continue to support us as we continue on this journey to make a positive impact. Want the support, we want the engagement. So please continue to support us. And thanks again for being here with us on the Black Male Impact.